Shut up and sit down.
I am a radical libertarian.
And we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You deserve better.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
You just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
There you go.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
Because no one brings tear gas to a gunfight.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
This is FSM.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight for Liberty. I'm your host, David Fite, here to get you fired up about the men and women out there making the world a freer place through politics, activism, journalism, and more. And it is our mission here to give you some hope for the movement and the future while providing some actionable advice and inspiring stories that help you get out there and fight for liberty yourself. We have an absolutely awesome activist out of the Pacific Northwest joining us tonight to talk about agorism and homesteading and so much more. But first, let's hear from our sponsors of today's episode. So that we can keep the lights on in this place. First up, as always, Blood of Tyrants Wine. If you're looking for a nice night in while sipping on the blood and tears of your enemies and supporting the destruction of the tyrannical state, look no further than Blood of Tyrants Wine. Choose between a smooth Merlot and a sweet Pinot Grigio or both, distributed by activists you know and love. BloodofTyrants.wine is the place to go. You can use promo code FSM to get 10% off your first order, or you can kickstart your day with their Energy Tea Liquid Freedom. It's a healthy yerba mate blend with a nice kick of raspberry. Will have you refreshed and energized to go out there and fight for liberty all day long. All of this is available at drinkbloodoftyrants.com or bloodoftyrants.wine. And you can click the link in the description and definitely make sure to use promo code FSM to get that 10% off. And this episode is also brought to you by LibertyCon, because that is coming up. Students for Liberty's annual international convention is coming up in February 7th through the 8th in DC. And you can join some of the greatest heroes for liberty all under one roof at the downtown Westin Hotel right there in DC. We're going to have Daryl Davis, Mark Pellegrino, Glenn Jacobs, Spike Cohen, John Mackey, Corey DeAngelis, so many more awesome people. I'm going to be on the main stage, so make sure to get your tickets today at LibertyCon.com. And if you use the code FIGHT, F-I-T-E, you'll get half off your ticket. Again, that's FIGHT, F-I-T-E. It's going to get you half off over at LibertyCon.com. Super excited about that. You guys should definitely all go get your tickets like right now. But without further ado, joining the fight tonight, farmer, butcher, agorist activist, and former congressional candidate, we have Ms. Sonja Agora. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
This is an absolute pleasure. So to start off, I always like to get in with a little bit of like a testimonial or an origin story. So I'm curious, where did you first get introduced to the concepts of like agorism and counter-economics?
So I thought that I came up with the concept for agorism all on my own. So it's kind of funny. But I was informed by my good friend, who is a former chair of our state Libertarian Party, that indeed agorism was a thing. And I got a copy of the New Libertarian Manifesto. I think was the first Konkin book I got. And then kind of went on from there. But I've been libertarian for a long time, especially just through our farming awakening with my family's farm. We very quickly realized that it was illegal to sell a ham that we grew and raised and butchered on our farm. It was illegal to sell it to our neighbor. And getting into raw milk, we just started realizing all of the regulations and the government interference. So we started leaning libertarian anyways. And then I went back and forth with a little bit of political stuff, especially through the big C word years. And then I got really burnt out on just raw politics, and it just didn't really seem like it was being that effective. And I decided to go back to my roots. And I was like, let's stop protesting at the school boards to like force them to let our kids go to their government indoctrination centers. Like maybe let's stop protesting at the grocery stores that's filled with garbage that we shouldn't be shopping at anyways. Maybe we should be creating our own network and our own communities that support each other. And so I thought I came up with this great idea to create this parallel economy. Thank goodness other people far smarter than I am had already done a ton of work on the subject. So that kind of blew my mind when I realized it was already done and that there was a ton of stuff to pull from, and there was a whole agorist community that was doing great things. So that's just like in a very brief snapshot, my introduction to agorism.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the kind of shutdown of everything, I think made a lot more people aware of the necessity for this kind of thought process, and just the concept of shortening the supply line from where your food or all of your stuff is created to get to you, and just make that as local and as short of a supply chain as possible. Really mattered when everybody realized that even just with the on the East Coast shutting down a couple of months ago, they went on strike for a couple of days, and everybody was like, what are we going to do? It's like, if you bought local, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's a great wake-up call because, food security is obviously like the most relevant, pressing one. But then also, like, where do you go for your medical care? Like, where do you go for like distribution, like trucking, like all of these different things? And then you dig in a little bit farther into what farmers have to do, because that's great. You source your meat from a local farm, you're good to go. But what if that farmer is very reliant on grain that's shipped from states away? Now we have a new issue. And so localization is just like this multifaceted thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it struck me. I've been watching the last couple of months the show The 100 from like years ago. I just skipped over it, and my wife got me into it. And just the concept of like landing back on Earth and having to just start from scratch after a nuclear holocaust, I was very quickly slapped in the face with how little I know. Like, I'm an Eagle Scout. I grew up in like an outdoorsy family. Like I would be able to survive significantly better than your average person in that situation, but still only probably for a week or two. Like, I don't know how to make clothes from scratch. That's not something that I've ever even considered learning how to do. So it's a very, you kind of don't realize how many things that we just kind of get from all over the place and are made either in other states or other countries. And then, when that supply line starts to shut down, it gets very problematic quickly.
It's true. And I mean, specialization is still really important, even within your networks. Like, that phrase that people say, jack of all trades, master of none, but better than a master of one. So it is good to like have a broad understanding of a bunch of things and be kind of good at a bunch of things. But at the end of the day, you should still specialize in one thing, which is something that I consult with people about when they're starting a new farm. It's like, pick your thing that you do and get really good at it.
That makes sense. I guess I'll ask, what's some other advice that you give when people are starting up in this kind of area? I'll skip ahead.
Picking your community is really, really important. It's far more important than people think. They think that it's all about getting the right land and getting the right house and getting the right equipment, which is important. But where you land and the community you embed yourself with is pretty essential. So yeah, and starting small. So just keep it simple. Like I talk to so many people, it's usually about 2 years in, they bought a property, they freaked out, they were super excited, and they got all the free Craigslist animals. They got all the free goats, they got all the free ducks and the chickens. And then like a couple of years later, they're hemorrhaging money, and maybe they're not even trying to make money. Right? Like maybe they just want a hobby farm. They want to raise their own stuff. They're not trying to do a full production scale farm. They're still hemorrhaging money. It's super stressful. They want to throw the towel in. And so definitely spending a couple of years just kind of feeling it out, which is hard to tell people because everyone, once you get the itch to do it, you're like, I have to act now because you're watching national and global events and you're like, I should have been doing this 10 years ago. Right. But picking, centralizing. So it's finding your main focus on the farm. Like my family's farm, their main focus is the raw dairy. And then everything else is complementary to that. But it took us like 10 years to figure out that that was the main enterprise of the farm. So that's usually what I advise people, is to pick your thing and then just focus on that, and don't go get every animal you can find. You're not, Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, that is some great advice. I have never lived on a farm personally, but I grew up like kind of surrounded by them, and so like most of my friends growing up grew up on a farm, and I worked on over half of them, in my like late teen years, and most of the friends that I grew up around were, there were a couple of them that were like the like wealthy farmers that like weirdly had a lot of money, and like their kids had the nicest toys, even though their dad was always in like jeans and overalls and whatever. And it always kind of made my brain short circuit. And then the rest of them were in that category of just usually hemorrhaging money, most of them were doing it for more moral reasons than financial reasons. Sure. And it just kind of snowballed out of control, as actually, especially like you were saying, like the food for the animals and sourcing that and figuring out how to get it to upstate New York in the middle of the winter was almost always what broke them.
Right. Like you start like maybe you have a great property for hogs, right? So you're like, I'm going to start a hog breeding operation. It's going to be great. But hogs are, even heritage hogs are super dependent on grain. Even if you're going soy and corn free, which you should. And so, so you start breeding hogs, and you go from 4 hogs to all of a sudden each sow has like 8 piglets. And this is, their gestation is 4 months. It's 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, which is kind of magical.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden you have all these pigs, and they get big, and then maybe you haven't established your market to sell them yet. And it's just nightmarish, right? So really going slow. Joel Salatin, who's a great guru for anyone that wants to get into farming, look up Joel Salatin. He's written a ton of books. He started Polyface Farms. I believe he says that you should spend 2 years on your property before you build permanent fencing. Because you need to understand the lay of the land. You need to see how water flows around the land. You need to see how animals move through the land before you start putting in permanent infrastructure.
Huh. That's some good advice. I would never have thought about something like that. What would you suggest for somebody who maybe isn't at the, moving and getting good farming property stage, and still kind of in either a city or suburban scenario at the moment, to kind of try to hone that green thumb and try to, start getting towards that?
I would find local farms that you like, that are producing things that you like, that you want to model yourself after, and see if you can offer your skills. And you don't need to have even farming skills or anything like that. Like, honestly, most farmers are not tech savvy. A lot of administrative things kind of go down the toilet because they're focused on like the blood and guts and birth of farming. So they're not really thinking about that. So if you come and you're like, hey, do you need help with website design or whatever your skills are, in trade for food, or going there and just helping and offering to learn and just creating a relationship. So it's not just this commodity based exchange where you're just buying niche meat. A lot of times that's not going to be sustainable for most families because it's financially unavailable for them. And so if you're going there and working in trade so you can get the food, then you also get the skills. So I always suggest people find internships. You can go to something called, realmilk.com. And this is specifically for raw milk. But if you go to realmilk.com, they have a raw milk finder. And so you can find these little farms. And if they're doing something like producing raw milk, they're probably also producing a bunch of other really cool stuff. And there might be kind of your vibe. So connect with those farms, and that can help.
Nice. I was actually just on that website this weekend.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I was at a every year some of the like upstate libertarian kind of clique. We usually get together more of like a Friendsgiving kind of time period. But we just did it this past weekend because schedules were crazy, and do a like fully cannabis infused like Thanksgiving meal, which is super fun. But we had raw milk at this feast from a farm literally right next door to the house that we were having it at, like milked literally the night before. And so we spent a bunch of like high libertarians sitting around a table talking about the ins and outs of raw milk. So we got pretty into it, as you can imagine.
So great. Oh man, I love that. I'm always sharing about realmilk.com on Twitter or X, and trying to tell people about it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely I kind of knew in the back of my head that I could get some around where I live, but I hadn't like gone through the steps of figuring it out. And there's multiple actually options within driving distance of me, which is nice.
Well, you're out on the East Coast, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in upstate New York.
So, yeah, you got tons of options.
Yeah. I just kind of got spoiled off of fairly good not raw milk, like there's a fairly small, supply line and, very locally sourced milk where I grew up. And I just always kind of got spoiled on like, oh, this is really good milk. This is like super natural and healthy and whatever. And it's like great. And I've been to the farms that the cows live on and whatever. But, that's the like middle school propaganda version of healthy. That's like along with the food pyramid and everything else. That's
it's better. I think like 10 years ago when we started our farm, or longer than that, there was no options. There was organic milk, and then that was it. And then slowly over the years, you notice that there was like organic grass-fed milk. And then they had organic, non-homogenized milk start showing up. And I was like, okay, like they're responding to the market, right? But they still can't put raw milk out there. So
yeah. Thomas Massey's trying to change that. I think he's sponsored a bill to legalize raw milk almost every year he's been in office.
Is that the Prime Act? Isn't that a part of the Prime Act?
Yeah.
I think that's what it
was. I've read more of his legislation than I care to admit. I nerd out every time he writes a bill. I'm like, ooh, what nerdy thing are we doing this time?
Yeah, he's my favorite one in there. If I had to pick one, it would be Massey. If I had to save one from a fire, it would definitely be Massey.
If I had to save, just kidding.
Yeah.
So on the topic of just kind of eating a little bit cleaner and closer to where your food is being created, what are some of the benefits that you've seen in your life as you've kind of focused on getting cleaner food?
I mean, I've always been pretty healthy. So
fair enough.
But so I haven't like overcome any health challenges like some people have. But I've heard the testimony and seen with my own eyes the effect that getting the products from my family's farm has had on the hundreds of families that we serve over the last decade. So we have people that have always been lactose intolerant that can drink our raw milk, which is very cool. We always like to play a test because people are like, I can't drink milk. And we're like, pretty sure you can drink this. And it has something to do. I've been challenged on this recently, so I'm not presenting it as fact anymore because I can't find any. Like Google doesn't work anymore for me to look up all these studies I read. Right? Like I feel like 10 years ago, I could look up anything and find the craziest stuff on Google. And now it's all hidden. But I read these studies. Anyways, it is said that raw milk still has the lactase enzyme intact. And people who are lactose intolerant don't have the lactase enzyme intact in their gut to be able to digest lactose. So therefore, lactose intolerant people can drink raw milk. For whatever reason, we've never encountered a person that can't drink lactose or who are lactose intolerant that can't drink raw milk. We've had people come to us because their children have really, really bad eczema, and they're doing all these different things to try and heal eczema. And there's something that happens when interaction with raw milk to heal people's eczema. We've had families with babies that didn't respond well to formula, and the mother wasn't able to breastfeed, and they gave the babies raw milk, which really gets people upset. But these kids running around now, they're like the healthiest people ever. So, I mean, just tons of testimony from people that we've seen that have overcome all these different health challenges, from helping them get off of seed oils and eating industrial commercial meat to getting them on high saturated fats and feeding them bacon and meat and milk. And all of a sudden they're super healthy and they don't have to take their statins anymore, things like that. So that's just been very validating to watch that happen over and over and over. It's like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is the right path. And especially since it's something that the government hates, it must be good. So
right. That there seems to be there's like a positive version of guilt by association that I haven't figured out the term for, that I know is a thing, but that I think applies here, where it's everyone that I know that hit that like kind of crunchy granola liberal stage in their early 20s and started like focusing on like eating healthier and, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about back before I looked into it and kind of like scoffed at it. Most of my friends that went that way, even though politically they went left at the time, have almost all circled all the way back around to being almost complete liberal or libertarians, if not anarchists, without any interaction with the political version of any of this at all, just because, you know, they started raising their own chickens and then realized how many stupid regulations there are around chickens. And then, you know, their friends that also raise chickens drink raw milk. And so they're like, oh, what's this raw? You know, and it's just kind of this rabbit hole that everyone I know, whether you start it from the political side or from the health side, they all kind of end up in a similar place, and they all agree on the end result of like what foods to change, what places to stop going to, what businesses are bad. You know, they all ended up at the same place. So I'm kind of like, I have a very strong feeling that you guys are all right about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the gateway drug to libertarianism. You know, you have to have a superb level of cognitive dissonance to do all these things and be like, no, the government's still right. Like, okay, I won't raise this raw milk that is really good and seems right to do, but the government said it's bad. Like everyone turns to the dark side eventually.
Once you have seen the truth with your own eyes, it's hard to still buy into the propaganda that you were raised on until you see that, like until you watch somebody who's been lactose intolerant their whole life drink raw milk and be fine. It's like, oh wow, this is like, that is earth-shattering to someone who believes everything the government says and that raw milk should have killed them or something. I don't even know what they say is the problem with raw milk. I just always know that it's wrong.
They like to cite the tuberculosis epidemic that basically kicked off pasteurization. I think I always get this date wrong. I think 1800s or early 1900s, Industrial Revolution time. And I should know that date. But Louis Pasteur is who created pasteurization. And that was a Hail Mary, because in the deep inner cities of these new industrialized city areas, they had these distilleries and these swill factories because they were producing a lot of alcohol, right? And they were like, we have this great idea. We have all this spent grain. Let's put some cows in the basements of these factories, and we'll just feed them all the spent grain from our swill. And we'll keep them in the dark, and we'll just feed them that, and then we'll bottle the milk, and we're going to make so much money. And then the milk ended up being this bluish color, and it was really like translucent. So they had to add chalk to it. And all of these children started getting severely ill and dying. And there was tuberculosis, and there was all these other diseases, horrible pathogens, because unhealthy cows put out really unhealthy milk, obviously. Meanwhile, in the countryside, everyone that was raising milk the way that it was intended to be raised, they weren't having this issue. So instead of addressing the actual issue, which was putting cows in a very unnatural situation and feeding them garbage, they were like, let's just nuke the milk to death and make it this dead substance. And then we'll give it to people, and that will solve the problem. And therefore we have pasteurization. And so a lot of people don't look past that, because when you look up raw milk, that comes up, and that's all very true. Like that happened, and it was raw milk. But they kind of forget to mention, well, humans kind of screwed things up.
Yeah. A fairly I'll give them credit on the business model if it was ignorance and not like pure evil. Like it's a smart idea. Right? Just recycle the stuff, get alcohol and milk out of the same kind of product. It makes sense.
It was industrialization, right? So everyone was excited. They're like, how do we maximize efficiency with everything? They're like, we have grain, we need milk. People like alcohol, they like milk. Let's put them together. It's going to be great. And so I think a lot of stupid things happened back then.
Yeah.
Human error.
Yeah, that was definitely likely more out of ignorance than anything else. But yeah, decent idea. I had no idea about that. That's completely news to me. I just always remember, I was probably like 7 or 8. I asked why the milk said homo on it. It was probably right around when I learned that was a word that shouldn't be said, and got explained like, oh, this is what makes milk safe to drink, and just really never checked back in on that.
Well, so the homogenization is a separate thing. The homogenization is so that the cream doesn't separate from the milk. And so you don't, because raw milk, you have a big fat cream layer on the top, and then you've got milk on the bottom. You got to shake it up, and then you have whole milk. But in the dairy industry, they run everything through this really, really high pressure system that it sends the milk through this plate with all these tiny, tiny holes, and it uses a ton of pressure, and it breaks all the fat molecules up. And so it homogenizes it. It's like an emulsification almost. And that's why you don't have to shake up your milk from the store. And there's also issues with that because they are disrupting the fat molecules in a way that some say are bad for people.
Gotcha. Does anybody do that part but not the other? So like raw homogenized milk, is that like without the pasteurization?
I don't know anyone that goes through the effort of doing that because it's a lot simpler just to shake the jar. So I don't know if people are buying. I haven't heard of anyone doing that. I think that would be really interesting. You can also just skim the cream off the top and sell people skim milk if you must, which I think is a travesty, but Fair. But I know people that, raise their own cows and they heat the milk a little bit. They do like a gentle pasteurization because of whatever reasons they want to do that. And I think that's better than the ultra high pasteurized stuff in the store. But, to each his own.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess there would, to really know the issues with both, there would have to be that random control group. I'm just kind of curious. Now my just like nerdy brain is doing things. So what are some other kind of, I guess, areas in life that you've tried to live more of an agorist lifestyle besides just like the meat and the milk?
I mean, a lot of it is, so I set up a network here in Oregon called the Oregon Liberty Network, and I'm not doing a lot with it right now just because it's a big thing to build up, and I'm still working on it. But basically, it was supposed to be a network to connect people to farms because I wanted to start with food yet again because it's the most essential thing. But for it to be more skill focused. So we had a couple classes where we would invite people out to the butchery. And then we also had, I would do rabbit butchery demonstrations because that's really approachable and easy for people just to learn how to harvest small game. If you can harvest a rabbit, you can harvest other small animals. So we would do stuff like that. We did some handgun classes just to get people taught how to do that because the whole point was to be an asset to your community. So if you know these basic skills, then you can help each other out. We also set up radio systems across the state, and we're building a network to be able to talk to each other. So if someone needed help with something, they don't have to call someone they don't know to come help them. They can call someone in their network that they know and they trust, and they can communicate and so on. So we were building things like that.
Nice.
Just to keep people connected and keep people activated, doing things together instead of having to outsource it to government that you don't know and doesn't particularly like you.
Yeah, I've been I've been toying with an idea here in this town just because there are the the Department of Transportation in my city is awful, and the plowing is just terrible and very slow. Usually the main roads are plowed and fairly well, within a reasonable time, but my street, it's sometimes 2 in the afternoon and it's still inches of snow on the road. But there are at least 2 or 3 dozen plow companies that I know of, just private, plow people's driveway plow companies, that I feel could get the town done faster. And one of these days, I'm just going to try to get them all together and crowdsource the funding to make them do it and just beat the plow companies out and just plow the town correctly the first time. And not leave all of these just giant mountains of snow in the road sometimes, or just if there's that one asshole parked on the side of the road, then the plows will just only plow half the road and just leave the whole other side open or something like that, which it's usually my neighbors that do it. So I'm the one that just has
wow.
Not only is my road not plowed, it's a mountain in front of my driveway, where they shift to go out and around the car. It's a fun time, but just something simple like that. It's we could easily, for significantly less money than we pay in our property taxes, just have someone else do that.
Yeah, or have your neighborhood go in on a snowplow all together. Everyone pitches in a little bit of money. You guys have your own snowplow and you just do it how you like in your own time. Or, obviously a company is going to be a fraction of the price that the government bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the government's billing, they're going to, build a $3 million bridge for 80 million, right? They're going to overspend and it's going to end up being garbage anyways. So I think that's a great idea. That's definitely something that people can do. It's I love hearing the stories when people fill in their own potholes, because the city or the county is just doing a terrible job keeping up roads, which I know is a favorite libertarian talking point. But just people taking it into their own hands, managing the space. I think that's the best way to go about it. And it requires talking to your neighbors though, right? How many neighbors surrounding us do we actually know?
Yeah, unfortunately, very small amount. I actually just met 2 of my neighbors that I've lived near for almost 2 years now, yesterday.
It's hard. And I was just thinking about this, it's definitely a lost part of American culture or society in general. Because people always talk about, oh, it was so safe back in the day. Our kids would ride bikes in the neighborhood and everyone would watch out for each other. And it was a high trust society, right? And for a multitude of reasons, we've shifted away from that. And I think in order to really activate agorist principles and all of these ideas we have, the first step really is to go and connect with all of your neighbors and actually know each other and talk to each other and help each other out and do projects together, which sounds really uncomfortable and unpleasant for most of us because that's just not what we do anymore. But it's kind of a requirement for these sort of things to succeed.
Yeah, and to put a perfect example on that, the reason I met my neighbors yesterday is because the one, so right here is a window that looks out at my neighbor's driveway, and yesterday my wife and I were just sitting in here talking, and I looked out and I saw him leaving, and then went and did something, came back, we were still talking, and I looked out and the car was in the same spot, and I saw him coming out of the house with paper bags. And I was like, he's stuck. I'm going to go help him shovel out because he had not looked correctly and hit the snowbank on the way out of the driveway.
Oh, no.
And so I went over to help, and an older lady from across the street came over to help. And just in typical millennial, it's 2025 fashion, he was like, no, it's okay. I got it. I'm from around here. I'm used to it. He was, in fairness, he was 3/4 of the way done shoveling himself out. I didn't do jack shit to help in the end. But even just on the person who needs the help's side, we're conditioned at this point to just be like, nah, I've got it. It's fine. Let alone were conditioned for me to not go over and even offer to begin with. There's like multiple stages of we have to get over whatever it is that we learned about not interacting as a community before we're actually like pushing a car together. And it's kind of sad, and it sucks. But
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those, in a way, you kind of have to just fake it till you make it as a community. Like, you were talking about like the, kids got to play outside and whatever. Like my kids do play outside. And I'm usually either out there or they're playing in this like lawn between this window and that driveway, and I can see them out my window or whatever. I'm not just like letting my kids run around the neighborhood completely unattended, but they do play outside, and so do my neighbors' kids, and the kids across the street fairly often. And I feel like even though we don't know each other, there is still this kind of unspoken, if something happens, we'll be there to help each other kind of thing. And we kind of proved it the other day when he got stuck. Multiple people came to help, and I don't know. I feel like it just comes down to just actually living as if we're still in the 50s every once in a while, and just pretend for a little bit that you're just that old school white picket fence community and act like it, and then you will be.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect example. And it's a little trickier for people in rural areas because you don't necessarily want to just walk down your neighbors' driveways without knowing them. And, people have dogs and guns. And it's like, I don't want someone just wandering onto my property being like, here, we bake some cookies. Like, I'd be nice eventually, but it'd be really weird at first. But how to, that's where things like local granges come into play, and like spaghetti feeds. Like rural communities, I think, work really, really hard to try and overcome that. Whereas in neighborhoods, you have like a little bit more FaceTime, a little more contact, being like, okay, like I know these cars going down my street. I know what the neighbors' kids look like, stuff like that. And all of that are just great steps towards getting to that level of community.
Yeah. I hope that there can be some sort of correction in society. I'm really not sure how or when, because especially, a lot of the things we've talked about are blatantly illegal. Whether we're talking about the raw milk or filling in potholes and plowing like an actual street, all of those things are illegal.
You're really big trouble, yeah.
And even like, another thing that I think about a lot is like a fire. There was a very big fire in my city back in like the 1800s or something like that. And there's a gigantic mural of it painted on the firehouse. It's just a couple blocks from my house that I see all the time. And, the painting is of, like everybody in town coming out to help and put it out. It burned down like almost a quarter of the town. And, it's just this very like kind of majestic thing of just like horses and buggies from all over just kind of coming in and putting out the fire. And I was literally standing in front of it, looking at it when the fire alarm went off and like all the trucks went, and I could kind of sort of see the smoke from the other side of the river. And my thought process was not, let me go help. It was, oh, I wonder like what's going on. Like it was curiosity. It wasn't like, let me go also be part of this community. And I also know, being the son of a fireman, and my grandpa was like the fire chief where they live, like I would not have been able to help, right? You don't just walk onto an active crime scene and just,
wouldn't like that very
help
much.
out.
You're like, get out of here. What are you doing?
Right. I like vaguely know what I'm doing just because I listen to my grandpa talk about it a lot, but I'm sure I would not be that much help. And I'm sure they had it under control. And it's just this very weird, like you're saying, we kind of offloaded a lot of it to the government, whether it's like a volunteer fire department or, police or whatever kind of government entity. or public schools, watching the kids all day. There's just so many different areas that we've just offloaded this responsibility, that to actually bring it back to the community is asking a lot from your neighbors.
It's asking a lot, and maybe it makes me a bad libertarian, but the last thing that I would defund, let's say we defund everything, get rid of everything, the last thing I would defund would be the fire department. Like, if there's anywhere that I want to contribute money towards, it's that, because it is like if my house burns down, your house might burn down, and then the neighborhood burns down, and there's only so many buckets, and who's coordinating the water? Like, people did it out of necessity back in the day, but fire departments have been around for a while. Like you said, like horse and buggies, like they had that on lock. But yeah, it would be pretty catastrophic. I actually just wrote about this today somewhere. About we were talking about the red dye ban, right? So the FDA finally said, we're going to ban this because it's really toxic. And that's a great conversation piece for libertarians, because banning things is generally bad, right? Like, one of my big libertarian wake up moments was the plastic bag ban here in Oregon. I was like a teenager and I was mad. I was like, what are we, children? Like, this is so stupid. Like, we're too stupid to be educated about using plastic bags, so you have to like take them away from us. Like, I remember being really offended, and everyone was confused about why I was so offended, but I was. And the red dye is kind of the same thing, where I've known about this for like 15 years. I've been talking about red dye. I don't let my kids eat it. That stuff, like, I would eat a bowl full of sugar before I would eat red dye. It's so bad. The government, like the FDA, finally admitting and not lying anymore that it is really bad for you is good. Putting a ban on it, it's almost like that's a necessary evil, because there's so many people in society nowadays that don't practice personal responsibility and don't even like know how to. Like there's been a large segment of the population that has been trained to just take and depend on the nanny state. Like, they've been crippled. And so if you're going to just pull the rug out from them, like us libertarians are like constantly thinking about being like, wouldn't it be great if, it didn't have like the police and every Second Amendment, it's like going nuts. Like, everyone can, bear arms wherever they want all the time. Totally agree. We get rid of, all of these different government institutions, and we just all are just responsible for our own actions. We maintain our own roads. It's going to be awesome. A lot of people are going to die. There's going to be a catastrophe because it's too abrupt. And so maybe things that are bad, like a ban on red dye, maybe serves as kind of an awakening for people who just eat up everything the government tells them as true. They're like, well, we trust these institutions. But maybe this will be a wake-up call, being like, they were wrong about that. And now they're admitting that they were wrong about that. So maybe you shouldn't blindly trust them. And it shouldn't be banned. I'd rather there be a warning. But this is where we're at. And so that was just an explanation for what you were just saying.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, the majority of people are going to think that they just figured this out and they banned it as soon as they found out. And, accidents happen. We make things that end up being bad all the time. We filled everybody's house with asbestos at one point in time. Like, whoops, stuff happens.
Right.
But they still have our best interests in heart now, because they banned it. Like, they're still I honestly, not to shit on what you're saying, but I honestly don't have the same optimism on this one, because so many people that I know are just going to take this in stride and be like, oh, well, the FDA is doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, this is me actively pushing back on my accelerationist doomer proclivities, which I have to like keep behind a locked door because it doesn't serve me. So I'm like, let's find the silver lining, guys. But that's really like the question that I have focused on for a few years now, which is how to encourage and inspire people to personal responsibility for their things. You're asking people to give up so many comforts You're asking them to take away this huge security blanket, which is the government. It takes care of my food. It tells me what to eat. It takes care of my children, tells us what to learn, tells us the truth. And it's, it's the blue pill. It's a very safe, comfortable place. And you're asking people a lot. So how do we steer people towards what is true and how to take accountability for their own lives? Without scaring them off immediately, which is usually what happens. And why is it that there's a portion of the community that gets it and then a large portion that doesn't? What's the difference there?
Yeah, autism.
It's a gift.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, honestly, there's days that I'm envious of them. Like if there was a blue pill, there were definitely days I would have taken it and just been able to go back to just happy, nonchalant life and just trust the systems and, care about sports again. And, just actually, like, I don't know, they seem happier. And a lot of them.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance really is bliss. And it's one of the reasons that I have taken such a step back from like electoral politics or political theory in any way, or even like promoting that, and shifted more to working with and promoting the like libertarian answer type, whether they're for-profit companies or non-profit groups. You have groups like You Are the Power who are out here righting the wrongs of government and doing what the government claims to be doing, which is keeping people safe, finding like they're literally spearheading a murder investigation at the moment because the local police just gave up on it. All of these different things, mostly in like a criminal justice sort of realm, where we're replacing what the government claims to be doing with not government. And there's a lot of other, organizations that I'm like excited to be able to just kind of help out in any way possible. Like the Mobility Independence Foundation is another one that I do a lot of work with. That they're out here. Not only have they designed a like wheelchair for disabled people that is better than anything else on the market, they're funding ways to get it to people for free and get people's current wheelchairs fixed for free all across the country at like so much faster of a rate than any government organization ever would. These people are waiting 5-10 years for a new wheelchair from the government, and we're finding a maker space that's able to like 3D print half the parts and source the other half and put it together for a couple $100 that we were able to crowdfund, and boom, there's a wheelchair.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's so much easier of a pitch to people when you're like, see, this is what replaces government, not you by yourself. You don't have to replace government completely for your life. There are answers, and there is still this community. And like we were saying at the very beginning, the specialization is still like a key element. You don't need to know everything and completely replace the federal government as a person to live in an anarchist society. There are still something I really want to see happen is for somebody to launch now, while the FDA currently exists, a competitor to the FDA, like an actual for-profit company similar to like the kosher stamps. That's actually just like a stamp that people can get on their products that is better than the FDA stamp.
So there was a website a while ago. I don't know if it still exists, and I don't remember if this is the correct name for it, but it was called Skin Deep, I think. And they had a rating system for all like body care products, like makeup and soaps and shampoos. And they would analyze it with their lab or whatever. They would send it in, and they would analyze it for how many different toxins and carcinogens and things were in it. And then they would post it on the website. So if you wanted to look at your products that you have at home, like something that sounds natural, but it's not, like Burt's Bees or Tom's toothpaste, right? Which is all like owned by Colgate now. You could look it up at this website and it would tell you, no, this is actually what's in it. So you could make an informed decision about it. And I would love to find that website again. I don't remember if it was Skin Deep, but I think that's a great idea. Like people love that USDA organic sticker, but it really means very little. There's so many loopholes. There's so many things that they can get away with. And it's also, it's an egregious assault on these farmers' independence too, because they want to enter this market and everyone is told, well, if you want to be in this market and sell this natural product, you have to get this stamp that says organic on it. But you also open yourself up to all of these permits and fees and the USDA crawling all over your property and making sure your turtles aren't endangered, like all that stupid stuff. I would abolish the USDA in a heartbeat if I could. Like number one, that one's gotta go. That one's toxic.
I very much agree with you on that one. It's definitely up there as just like one of the most useless ones.
Yeah, they literally just exist to tell you what not to do and make you pay money.
And they're wrong most of the time. That's the thing that really gets me about some of these organizations. Like, there's obviously so many complaints to be had about the FBI, right? But if you really analyze all of their cases, they still have an above average, or like above not average, like middle, like above 50%. Like they actually got the right guy. If we're looking at all the stuff the FBI does, they're not doing a terrible job at all of it, right? The USDA and the FDA are both just like wrong 80% of the time, and it's just completely bought and paid for, and the entire point of their existence has been bureaucrated itself out of existence.
Right. They're literally meter maids. Like the worst people. Like they exist just to cut you down. They don't come there helping you with anything. Like it's I don't have anything kind to say about the USDA.
Imagine if the USDA was an organization. Like, I'm gonna put my commie hat on real quick and just like how government could exist, right? If it actually did what it said it's supposed to do, and we have a federal government that has trillions of dollars, and we have a USDA, would it be so awesome if what they did was spend those tens of billions of dollars a year on going out and helping all of the farms make sure that their stuff is safe and like good, and like, you know, if they have old equipment, getting them newer equipment that's cleaner, better to like, you know, even in like even if you're not going to give people raw milk, like giving people a pasteurization machine rather than just fining them for not having one.
Yeah, exactly. Be like, oh, I see that you have a drought here. How about we help you dig that giant pond that you need to contain water, instead of using helicopters and drones to find out who's storing water and then fining them for water. Like,
right.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be really cool.
I might not be a libertarian if that's how the government worked. You know?
Commies, like,
I would almost be okay with it. Like, you know, there
but
is
then again,
an anarchist society that I would be okay with, I think.
But then again, like all of these government institutions is in replacement of the community that we no longer have. So if you live in a small community, like maybe several hundred people, or 1,000 people, and a couple people get cows and everyone pitches in to come milk the cows and take home the milk. And if people want to, raise this, or if everyone wants to come together and build this, dig this huge reservoir out so they can store water or build roads, like that's how it used to be. And that's the way that everyone can stay connected. But instead we outsource it to the government now. And they're so far away and they're so out of touch and they don't know anyone in the community. And they have this broad application of these laws that don't apply to everyone. It's like you're taking laws that work for the city and like progressive policies that might be needed in a densely populated city. And then you're taking and applying it to these rural communities. It doesn't make any sense at all. And so for me, it always comes down when I'm trying to like solve the issue of like why we have a government. It always comes down to the breakdown of our community where we looked to these other people for help at some point, and it just got out of control.
I feel like not to sound too much like Uncle Ted, I feel like technology plays a huge part in that, both like vehicles and then like the internet, of just having access to the whole world most of the time, is finances dependent in some cases, but for the most part, most people can save enough money up in just a week to take a flight to almost anywhere in the world. And that's just not something that we were able to do up until very recently in like all of human history. And I think that really plays a part because we have our communities just aren't in our community anymore. Like you and I live nowhere near each other. Right. I'm talking to my neighbor right now. I'm talking to you who's on the other side of the country, and we are part of a community, but it's not a community that's going to help me get unstuck if I get stuck in my driveway. Like,
right, I'm not going to.
You cannot physically help me with that.
They're in like 7 hours.
Yeah, neither can even the person that's going to clip this episode up when we're done. Lives about halfway between us, and the person that makes my graphics lives in fucking South America. So there's just it's cool and it's great and I love it in so many ways. I'm not an Uncle Ted, but I feel like it creates a very hard to get over conundrum of having to build two communities at the same time, actually be your community while also still caring about social media or national politics or your family that was able to move to the other side of the country. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if humans have the capacity to do both at the same time.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm wrong. Like I have this very Luddite urge in me. I love old things. I love old methods and traditional ways. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if society just went back to like all these things that for me is good and true and real. But you're right. We are part of this global community and it has opened a ton of doors and it's fascinating. And we have this ability to travel and see each other and learn from different people, at the click of a button. And so there's a lot of everything is so accessible now. So maybe that's just what the future's like. And I need to catch up. But I still have this romantic idea in my head that, face-to-face people that you can interact with and, you're in each other's hemisphere and, their families and you have dinners together and you interact. Like I'm an extrovert. So maybe that's just me being weird and projecting what I want from people all the time. But I do get kind of stuck on that sometimes, being like, maybe I'm the one that needs to like get with the program. Like maybe I'm not right. Maybe we don't need to like, because a lot of these things that we talk about, especially agorism, especially like anarchist communities, unfortunately, I do think that for it to really come to fruition, it would require a semi, if not full collapse of society to be able to really kick ass with that stuff. And that's a terrible thing that I don't wish upon anyone because it'd be terrible. But everything is going to continue to progress forward. And so there has to be this integration between being a part of this global community and being online and, staying active with that, but then also trying to invest in your local community. Because if someone comes to your door and to cause you trouble, those are the people that you want to have show up. Like, I'm not going to go on Twitter and be like, you guys help me. It's like, they'll be like, good luck. Like they'll offer some advice or a YouTube video, but they're not going to show up at my house and have my back, so you gotta have a little bit of the two.
Yeah. I think to put my fucking commie hat back on, I guess I'm just going all the way. I think they make a really good point when they address that most of the innovation since like the 1900s has been explicitly for profit and not just to make the world a better place. Most of the time, there was like a few inventors back in like the early industrial revolution. You know, you've got like Tesla and a couple of other people that were kind of trying to just make the world a better place. And it very quickly got monopolized into being about just money, and to where I do think that there's an alternate reality where maybe we did go a little bit more commie and Uber is just a free ride kind of an app. And, you know, you have kind of that best of both worlds scenario with, and it's probably like terribly like tyrannical politically in that alternate reality. But as far as what we're talking about, it might be kind of that best of both worlds of we have the technology that actually helps make the community better and not just kind of separate us all into pieces. But I don't know. That's just
I think there's a human proclivity to screw it up. Like I'm definitely not of the unconstrained mind. Like in Thomas Sowell's book, Conflict of Visions, he says there's two groups of people. There's people of the constrained mind and people of the unconstrained mind. And I'm definitely of the constrained mind, which is recognizing that humans are inherently flawed. Like no matter what, I think we have these proclivities and we have these bad things that we like to do. We're prone to violence and selfishness. And we have to create structures and systems around us to kind of hold us together and to keep us on the right track. And the people of the unconstrained mind think that it can be evolved out of us. It can be educated out of us. So you see a lot of that with like leftism and communist governments that have done really bad things to people, even though they probably started out thinking that they were doing the right thing. It's a beautiful idea. It looks great on paper.
Right.
But they think that, okay, you get a child from a really young age, we can mold this person into this type of member of the society. And we just do that over enough generations and people are going to turn out to just be good. I don't think that's really reality. I think that we're flawed and we're going to screw up. We're going to do bad things. And we have to surround ourselves with community and structures and rules, right, that bind us together. And they can be voluntarily agreed to rules, but we're going to have probably some binding rules among us in our society.
Yeah. I think the only way to make communism work is like Brave New World style. Like just complete brainwashed from day one into that. And it's fine.
Right.
I mean, it works in the book for the most part.
Yeah. Or you have like The Giver, that kind of version of reality. It's like little 15-minute cities, right? Everywhere. Everyone's part of society. They don't have big feelings about anything. That's great. Problem solved. Or you just have the human experience, and we fluctuate between extreme communism and anarchy, a little bit of anarchy, put in there sometimes, and then fascism. We're just kind of going both ways all the time.
At the moment, it looks like we're nose diving towards the fascism side of things.
It's time for that now. We tried the other thing.
Yeah, back to the fascism. I've for a long time thought that the real mission of the movement, not the party or any like specific group, I'm not taking anything over, but what the movement as a whole needs to focus on is prepping people for the inevitable collapse of society, even if it happens to not be in our generation or in our lifetime, which I think it is going to be, but I could be wrong about that. We need to make sure that those that whatever blip of anarchy that we get in that time frame is able to last at least a little bit with people who understand it on a philosophical basis, not just a political basis. They're not just libertarians that know what libertarian policy looks like, but anarchists who understand what personal responsibility looks like and community and everything that we're talking about here. I think if we get agorism and anarchism as like the philosophical bases that they are widespread enough, that when that collapse does happen, there will be at least pockets of human existence that are able to kind of just not have anything happen in that time, just be able to kind of stay isolated from it because they don't rely that much on a national supply chain or their local government or their federal government, or and they're able to actually just survive because people like you were in their community teaching them how to do it from 10 years ago.
Don't squander like a limited opportunity, right? And that's what really kickstarted my agorism journey, was realizing that we're on the precipice of something. And even if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, I also agree. I think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I'd really like it if it did, because I want to contribute.
I'm glad you said it, because I'm thinking.
I know. I mean, I don't want it to happen, but if it's going to, it'd be really great if it happened in my lifetime where I can actually contribute something instead of my kids having to deal with it. But that was the real thing for me, was like, holy shit, my kids are going to have to, it's going to get worse. Like it's getting worse. My kids are going to have to deal with it. My grandkids are going to have to think about that. And that really upset me into action, being like, all right, like we need to have this infrastructure set up like years ago. Like we need to have all of our food figured out. And I'm not talking about just storing food. Like that's like short term, maybe a year you could do that if you went nuts. But no, I'm talking about like your safety, your radios, your water, and it's not just storing water yet again. Like you need to have all these resources and you can't do it all by yourself. So you need to have a community. And so I started just really kind of working on that when I first got introduced to agorism, because it seemed imperative because of the time that we are in. You don't want to just start thinking like, and Americans, we're so comfortable, right? We're so comfortable. We still go to our job every day. You see things like assassination attempts online, and like we're super close to nuclear war with, this country and that country. And everyone's like, yeah, like I'm going to work now, And so it's like, everyone's going to get caught with their pants down, and things happen all the time. There's natural disasters. Like look at LA right now. Those people are not prepared at all. So it's like, maybe before you consider moving into a major city with your family, I don't know, think about it for a second. Maybe that sounds paranoid, but things happen. Like maybe you should start preparing now. Like the best time to plant a fruit tree is yesterday. Just get things set up. And that requires meeting the right people and connecting with people. You can't do it by yourself.
Yeah. Amen. I keep trying to get my dad to move out of the state along with me wherever my family ends up going, or because I just fucking hate New York so much, and they do too. And my dad is like pretty set on dying here, and I'm like, why? This place sucks and you hate it. And I have realized fairly recently that like as I'm trying to check all these boxes of like where I want to live and set down my roots, we live on a well, or they live on a well. They have solar panels. They have like over an acre. They have a fairly decent garden. It's fertile land. What's across the street that they don't own, but in the event of something, could very easily take by force, because no one really owns it, is like 150 acre apple orchard that could very easily be repurposed into growing different things.
Yeah, they should stay put.
Yeah,
like drag your dad away from this. What are you doing?
Yeah. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, actually, this is you're pretty fucking set, actually. And I wish it wasn't in a state like New York, because the problem is it depends on what the thing is that takes out society.
Right.
Because if it's a nuclear war, we're dead in the first 5 minutes of it. I live 3 miles from 2 nuclear plants and about 15 miles, 20 miles from an army base.
Oh yeah.
And then there's another army base about an hour south of me. My parents are about 20 minutes south of me. So like we're dead instantaneously. Once both sides launch the things, we're just fucked in that scenario. If it's like dollar collapses, we might be all right, you know?
Yeah, or if like Yellowstone blows up, you guys are probably pretty good. I look at that one a lot. I'm like, okay, like Oregon, we don't have tornadoes, we don't have hurricanes. We're due for a massive earthquake that's going to level everything at some point, but you know, maybe we'll be okay where we're at. If Yellowstone blows up, I think we'll still be okay. We have some bases. If Russia invades from the West Coast, that's bad. You know, I don't know. I think we're pretty good over here, but there's really like nowhere to go in general.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons to everywhere.
Yeah, I've been looking at because somebody leaked a map or that like a month ago when we were like really close to nuclear war, when like they found like US bombs in Russia fired from Ukraine or whatever, and Putin was like, do that again and you're dead. Somebody leaked a map from the Russian intelligence of like their actual like strike points of where they would have sent things. I'll find it and send it to you.
From social media for like 3 days, and I missed out on so much stuff.
Yeah, I always do that at the worst times too. But you know, you're looking at it and you're either near a major city and gonna get bombed, or you're far enough away from a major city that you're at a nuclear silo and gonna get bombed. So there's really like there's chunks of the Midwest that are basically in like Southwest that are basically uninhabitable that are like okay, but there's really not much that you can do there. You're either close to the military targets or you're close to the civilian targets, and we've kind of taken up most of the in between.
Yeah, well, hopefully we just avoid that scenario. Hopefully some other sort of disaster that we can manage. But nuclear war is so unfair, which is why everyone wants to avoid it, because it sucks. Like there's not even a fighting chance. It's like, oh, I have like this amazing arsenal of weapons. You'll never even get to use them. You never get to it. You're just dead. That's unfair.
Your only chance is a bunker at that point.
Yeah, and then like an actual supply of prepped food. Yeah. Like nuclear winter bums me out hard because I'm like, it doesn't matter how many cows I have. Like they're going to die because they can't graze. And that sucks. Like that takes away my whole idealistic, magical fantasy world of surviving an apocalypse.
Unless you can figure out a way to do like solar powered artificial sunlight in like a very large bunker that can fit at least like some amount of animals and plants.
Like hydroponic, like grow fodder for the cows.
Yeah. That would require a very large bunker, but it's doable.
I think you could do pigs. That sounds awful. Maybe you could do pigs.
You would also have to invent some sort of smell-proof door.
I think that's part of the equation. That would just be it. That would be your life. You're alive, but you're surrounded by pigs.
Yeah. It's better than the alternative.
Yeah. All right. I think we're onto something.
Yeah.
That'll be my next project. Bunkers for people and how to put pigs in them.
There we go.
It's terrible.
Well, before I let you go, tell people where they can learn more about you and agorism and follow in your footsteps.
I'm currently mostly just on X at Sonja Agora. And yeah, I strongly suggest everyone read Rothbard and Konkin and all of that good stuff. Read more books. And check out my family's farm, Helios Farms. You can go to hfpma.com if you want to become an intern, spend 3 months in Oregon, learn how to do a bunch of stuff. Do butchery stuff with me and milk cows and leave with a certificate of having skills.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty dope. 2 years ago, when I didn't have like a family and kids and stuff, that would have been a hell yeah.
You can bring the kids too. You can bring your folk. Yeah.
There you go.
Bring the whole family.
Well, you heard her, folks. Make sure that you like this video, throw another hell yeah in the comments for the algorithm's sake, and share it around to all of your friends that you think might be interested in learning how to better their lives by shortening the supply chain. And more farm to table is even easier when the farm is in your backyard. If you haven't got your tickets to LibertyCon yet, make sure you hurry up. The hotel is filling up very fast. And then come on back here next week, same place, same time. We have objectivist Michael Leibowitz coming on to talk about criminal justice reform. So, Sonja, thanks again. This was absolutely awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, keep up the fight.